Get ready to ride this timeline. I hope you brought snacks. Today, we are talking about the firebombing of Dresden in 1945, why it happened, what actually happened over those 3 days, and why the story still sets off arguments nearly 80 years later. Here's the setting. It's early 1945. Germany is losing, but the war is not over. Armies are still moving, supplies are still moving, people are still dying every day across Europe. Dresden is famous for its art and architecture. You'll hear it called the Florence on the Elbe. That reputation is real. But Dresden is not just a museum city frozen in time, it's also a working city inside a total war system. It has rail connections, communications, factories, and workshops tied into the war economy, and it sits on transport routes that matter a lot in the final months of the war. And Dresden is packed. By February 1945, the city has a huge number of refugees pouring in from the east, fleeing the Soviet advance. That means more people, more crowding, more confusion, and fewer safe places if anything goes wrong. Now we get to the raids. Between February 13th and February 15th, 1945, Allied air forces hit Dresden in multiple attacks. The Royal Air Force struck at night, and the U.S. Army Air Forces followed with daytime raids. Hundreds of heavy bombers were involved across the sequence. The key detail is the bomb mix: high explosives and incendiaries. High explosives rip open roofs, shatter windows, break water lines, and turn neighborhoods into dry kindling. Incendiaries are designed to start fires everywhere at once. And when enough fires start in a dense city center, those fires can merge into something worse than a big blaze. They can produce firestorm conditions in some areas: extreme heat, violent winds feeding the flames, smoke that chokes shelters, and streets that become corridors of heat and debris. The first major wave hits at night. Fires start quickly. Emergency response is overwhelmed. Then another wave follows while the city is already burning and disoriented. That timing matters because once a city is on fire, it becomes easier to see from the air and harder for people on the ground to recover between strikes. The next day, American bombers arrive in daylight. These raids are often described as being aimed at transport targets like rail facilities and marshalling yards. But by that point, Dresden is already in chaos: smoke, broken infrastructure, mass movement of people, and fires still spreading. Now the question everyone asks: why Dresden? The lazy answer is because it was beautiful. The other lazy answer is because it was purely military. The real answer sits in the uncomfortable middle. Dresden had military relevance. It was a significant transport and rail hub, and in February 1945, the Allies were focused heavily on disrupting German movement, communications, and the ability to shift forces. Dresden and its rail links mattered in that larger system. There was also war-related production in and around the city, though not in the cartoon way people sometimes imagine. It wasn't a single target like a tank factory that you could knock out and go home. It was a modern city plugged into a wartime economy. At the same time, Allied bombing doctrine by 1945 had already accepted methods that caused large-scale civilian death. That's not a moral defense. That's a factual description of how strategy had evolved in the air war by that stage. So when you combine military goals with urban area methods, you get outcomes like Dresden: massive fire damage, heavy civilian casualties, and an event that becomes a symbol for generations. Let's talk about what it looked like on the ground. Night, sirens, people scrambling for shelters, refugees who don't know the streets, families separated in smoke, fires spreading faster than anyone can control. High explosives damage water mains, which cripples firefighting.
Buildings collapsed, streets clogged with debris and people. In the worst hit areas, heat and smoke make survival inside shelters uncertain. This is part of why Dresden never became just a target list story. The human experience is too raw to ignore. Now we have to handle the most argued about piece: the death toll. Right after the raids, casualty estimates went everywhere. Some numbers were inflated, and those inflated numbers traveled well because they were emotionally powerful. Nazi propaganda officials had incentive to increase the horror in the retelling, even trying to claim numbers up to 500,000. Then later, the Cold War and public debate kept these dramatic figures alive, even as better research became available. Modern investigations, including a major commission authorized by Dresden city leadership, concluded a death toll in the range of 22,700 to 25,000. That number is still a catastrophe. It is still mass death. It is still mostly civilian lives lost. It was a calculated act inside a total war environment, carried out with weaponry and tools that could not and did not distinguish neatly between rail and production lines and neighborhoods holding civilians.
Dresden also became something after the war. It became a symbol. It could be used to criticize Allied strategy, to frame German civilian suffering, to fuel political narratives, and sometimes to distract from Nazi crimes by changing the subject. So Dresden is not just a historical event, it is also a story people weaponize. Here is the bottom line: Dresden shows what happens when modern war treats cities like systems, rail lines, communications, and productions. Those categories sound cold, and they are cold, but the people living inside those systems are not categories. They are human beings, residents, refugees, children, and elderly people who did not choose the strategy and could not escape the fire. So when someone says, Dresden proves my point, ask them what version of Dresden they mean. The one grounded in records, careful research, and war needs? Or the one made of slogans and exaggerated numbers? And that, my friends, is Dresden. Facts and context, with the part people love to twist. I'll catch you on the next timeline.